Rajasthan Police. Top cop of the Rajasthan Police has confirmed. Monu Manesar, the man who's accused of murder, he is a cow vigilante, has been on the run for months now, ever since that murder took place. This is Monu Manesar in that image, that visual that you see there. Despite being on the run, despite absconding, he had several of the social media platforms that were active where he was sending out messages by and large. Let me cut across to Jai Kishan, our correspondent, joining us live more on that. Jai Kishan, Monu Manesar, the man who's accused of murder, has been finally detained by the police after months of the crime taking place, after months of that case that was filed against him. Tell us, where did they find him?
Nabila, as of now, what top officials of Rajasthan Police has confirmed us is that the new police, along with the neighbouring district, has detained Monu Manesar. From where he has been exactly detained, the details are yet to be divulged in. But the big news is that Monu Manesar, who is accused in the murder of Nasir and Junaid, he is considered as the main conspirator in the so-called lynching of Nasir and Junaid, who were abducted from Bharatpur, taken to Haryana and then brutally killed. He has been detained by Haryana Police, and very shortly he would be handed over to the Bharatpur Police, where he would be quizzed by not only Bharatpur Police but also with Alwar Police, because he is also suspect in multiple cases in that pocket, which comprises of some districts of Haryana, that's Mewat region, Alwar, Bharatpur. So as of now, what we have been picking from our sources is that he has been detained by new police, and very shortly Rajasthan Police will take him in custody. The DGP of police had told in past that he is one of the main conspirators. Also, the Haryana Police is investigating the case that he was the one who triggered the same reaction what happened in Nuh recently. So more details are to come, but it's a big news that Monu Manesar has been detained, and very shortly Rajasthan Police would be taking his custody.
All right, thank you very much, Jai Kishan, for joining us on that. The murder accused Monu Manesar has now been detained with the Rajasthan Police. They're going to be taking over this case. All right, big news now. BJP chief JP Nadda lashes out at the India alliance over Udayanidhi Stalin's comments. In a detailed social media post, JP Nadda has claimed that the India alliance was formed to attack Sanatan Dharma, and it's a well thought out strategy by Rahul and Congress. This is BJP chief JP Nadda speaking on the India alliance stance on the comments made on Sanatan Dharma by Udayanidhi Stalin. BJP chief JP Nadda lashing out at the India alliance over Udayanidhi's comments. And in that detailed social media post, Nadda has claimed that the India alliance was formed to attack Sanatan Dharma, and it's a well thought out strategy by Rahul Gandhi and the Congress. JP Nadda speaking on this. In fact, JP Nadda in the latest comes up attacks the India bloc collectively, saying that while and what we know is that some parties within the India bloc, like for example the Shiv Sena, has condemned the statement made by Udayanidhi Stalin. There were few of them within the India bloc opposition members itself who weren't happy with Junior Stalin making such a comment on Sanatan Dharma. But by and large, you had Karti Chidambaram, you had Priyank Kharge, Congress netas, MPs themselves, who backed Udayanidhi Stalin, saying he did nothing wrong. Now, JP Nadda wading into that controversy, saying that it is a well thought out strategic plan of the Congress to pander to their vote bank. This is India's strategy, says JP Nadda. Let me cut across to Aishwarya Paliwal joining us live. Aishwarya, tell us, what has JP Nadda said, hinting at this being a planned comment by Udayanidhi Stalin to galvanize support from within their vote base, the Dalits and the Ahinda community, by and large.
Well, this is what the Bharatiya Janata Party has done.
All right, we seem to have lost her audio connection. We'll try and patch Aishwarya on that. But here's JP Nadda wading into the Sanatan Rao, saying that it's a planned affair. What Udayanidhi Stalin said is a planned affair, and that his remarks almost supported by the Congress. Looks like this is a strategy by the Congress to pander to their vote bank. JP Nadda for the first time commenting on the matter. Aishwarya back with us. Go on, Aishwarya. Aishwarya, can you hear me? Aishwarya, if you're with us.
Yes, Nabila, you know, one of the things
Go
that
on.
the top BJP leaders and now the president. Well, Nabila, this is something that the top leaders of the Bharatiya Janata Party have been saying since the day Udayanidhi Stalin made that comment about Sanatan Dharma. According to them, this is a comment which has been made just to divide the Hindus, just to divide the votes that the Hindus give. Now, this is what the top leaders of the BJP have been saying, and now through a tweet, the president of the Bharatiya Janata Party, JP Nadda, is also pointing towards a conspiracy behind this kind of language being used by Udayanidhi Stalin. The BJP is now saying that the top leaders of the Congress party, be it Sonia Gandhi, be it Rahul Gandhi, they are all silent on this, and now it is raising the questions as to why the India Alliance and the top leaders are not saying anything when fingers are being raised at the Sanatan Dharma.
Right, Aishwarya, thank you very much for joining us. Well, that's JP Nadda, who's for the first time commented on the Sanatan Dharma comment that was made by Udayanidhi Stalin, saying this is a well thought out strategy of the Congress and the India bloc alike. All right, meanwhile, DMK defends Udayanidhi Stalin's Sanatan remarks, says remarks have been misinterpreted. The DMK says it's quite clear that we are not against Hinduism. We are against some Sanatan Dharma views. DMK says BJP is misinterpreting our remarks. This is a word coming in from the DMK itself, saying that our words are being constantly misinterpreted and twisted. And defending Udayanidhi Stalin says that we are clear that we are not against Hinduism. This has been misinterpreted. Some of them are against our views because they are trying to twist it for political gains. We are against some Sanatan Dharma views, particularly not against Hinduism at all. All right, let me cut across to some visual CCTV footage that we've received of Monu Manesar, who's been absconding and now has been detained. He's been arrested by the police. And these are the CCTV footages that we are bringing to you. There you have it. That CCTV footage clearly showing Monu Manesar, who has been on the run, absconding for quite a while, finally being detained by the police. The cow vigilante, Monu Manesar, there, who's been detained by the police. We're going to cut to all that CCTV footage and the details coming in on his arrest. A short break. Do stay with us.
From bonhomie with US President Biden to UK Prime Minister Sunak to Italian Prime Minister Meloni, this G20 summit was all about dosti and diplomacy. As he explained the Konark wheel to President Biden and later the Sabarmati Ashram in detail, Prime Minister Modi's rapport with US President Biden was on full display. The chemistry between the two leaders was the highlight of G20 summit. Prime Minister Modi's bond with Rishi Sunak also stole the limelight. On day one of the summit, the moment Sunak saw Modi, he greeted him with a namaste and a warm hug. And on the second day of summit, both leaders were seen strolling together after paying homage to Mahatma Gandhi. Rishi Sunak, who is first Indian origin Prime Minister of the UK, has often expressed his admiration for Modi.
I have enormous respect for Modi ji, and he's been personally very warm and kind to me, and we're working very hard, as I said, on our shared ambition of concluding an ambitious and comprehensive trade deal between India and the UK, because both of us think that would be a good thing.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni also shared a light-hearted moment with Prime Minister Modi as she arrived for the G20 summit. It was Meloni who hailed Modi as most loved leader of the world when she met him in March this year.
I firmly believe that there's a lot that we can do together. This will lead me to the approval rate that the Prime Minister Modi has reached. I think he's the most loved one of all around the world. But I mean, this has really proven that he has been a major leader, and congratulations for that.
With Prime Minister Modi's good ties with the world's tallest leaders, the formula of dosti and diplomacy is yielding great results for India. Bureau Report, India Today.
Hello and welcome. The G20 summit is being seen as a big diplomatic win for India. And I am delighted to be joined at this moment on India Today by one of the key architects of India's diplomatic win, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar. Dr. Jaishankar, welcome and congratulations on a job well done.
Well, thank you, and good to be here with you.
Your book is titled The India Way Strategies for an Uncertain World. And during India's G20 presidency, we saw a lot of those strategies come into play in this uncertain world as you showed the rest of the countries the India way. In India's journey as a country moving from being a middle power to a world power, how significant do you think the Delhi Declaration is?
I think it's very significant, Rahul, because for a variety of reasons. One, the G20 itself is the premier global forum today. More so when we see the UN completely gridlocked, when in fact many other groupings are either divided or, shall I say, not functional. So this is actually, in a way, the coming together of the top 20 countries of the world. Now, added to that, we called another 9, so you can say roughly the top 30 countries of the world, 14 international organizations. So there were 43 people around the table. Now, it was significant because, in a way, it was a test, if you could look at it that way, of our ability to really shape the global agenda. To say that look, at this time, in our view, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the pressing issues, and in our view, that's really what the premier forum should be discussing. So to the extent that we actually got the G20 to focus on the global south, to look at today's world and its problems in a particular way, I would say that in itself was one achievement. The second was, it's a very polarized world. It's very polarized, you can say east-west. It's also very divided north-south. It's not just the Ukraine conflict. I think the COVID pandemic has really wreaked havoc on the international system, and there are other issues. I mean, there are fundamental issues about the inequity of the current global order. So here is India. You have an east-west issue, you have a north-south issue. So it was also in some ways a test of our ability to forge a consensus, to find a common landing point. And then it was for ourselves. You could say a self-imposed or a self-set way of testing ourselves, that today, in the past we've always done any gathering in a very kind of sarkari, bureaucratic way. Can we do it differently? Can we take it out to the rest of the country? Can we link it to what is happening in societies? Can we make people feel that yes, this is an event or a responsibility in which I too have some connection? And I think in terms therefore of the agenda, in terms of the bridge building, in terms of the manner in which it was done, I think each one of them was a significant step forward to us. So certainly to me, Indian foreign policy or Indian diplomacy post G20 looks, I would say there are good reasons to be satisfied with it.
In each of the ministerial meetings that happened since India's G20 presidency began, there was lack of consensus, largely on account of the Russia-Ukraine war and how those words should be framed. Were you apprehensive that at the end of the G20 summit there may be no joint communique, as was being widely feared in many capitals, that it will be just too much, the gaps are too many to bridge? The Indian opposition in any case was waiting to pronounce the G20 a big failure?
Well, look, I would say the way we handled it was from the very start to tell the G20 and or to make them all accept this, which is wherever we get agreement, let's lock that in. So we didn't want a situation where, let us say, out of 30 paras you didn't agree on 2. So you lost all 30 paragraphs. So you sort of said, okay, I give you an example. I myself chaired the development ministers meeting. Now we all agreed, all of us, all 20 of us, that the sustainable development goals had fallen well behind. It was a source of enormous global anxiety. So if we could lock that in, and we did it as a standalone document. Similarly, the idea that, the idea of a lifestyle for sustainability. Everybody said, okay, we understand it, we buy it, we like it, we lock that in. So our approach was, therefore, what you could get unanimity about, lock that in, where you couldn't, in a sense, keep trying meeting after meeting after meeting to narrow that divide. And I think in retrospect it was a sensible strategy, because what it did was it left us in the last, let's say, 2 weeks to the summit, a relatively limited number of issues, of which of course the Ukraine, the geopolitical paragraph, as they say, was among the most problematic. Now here too, one part of me said, yes, look, we've isolated the issue, let's work it through. But it wasn't just a question of, finding the right words and, shall I say, finessing it with good language. What was happening in the real world, if you would, was also that at various levels, the Sherpa and the Sherpa's team were talking, I was talking to my counterparts, at certain points of play where required, Prime Minister himself came in. So we also knew that, in many ways, a lot of countries were invested in the G20. They were invested in the presidency of the G20, in the current presidency of the G20. And that gave me a lot of confidence that, look, at the end of the day, there would be a desire on everybody's part to find a landing ground. So, I always believed that we would get it done. The question was, that doesn't mean it happens on its own. The last few days, I think, were particularly, in a sense, challenging. But there were some things we did which were very useful. Prime Minister, for example, in the middle of, on the eve of G20, actually made a half-a-day trip to Indonesia. Okay, he flew overnight, reached Indonesia, spent a few hours, took up, and then came back. Now, the impact of that was, if, the others got the message that here was a Prime Minister willing to put himself out for the success of somebody else's event. Now, it generates naturally at the leadership level that sense that, look, if he is willing to do it for others, we also need to reciprocate. We need to back him up. Both before the G20 and actually at that meeting, including the day, the morning when we finally got the conclusion. There were still issues which needed to be resolved, and in some cases I had to ask him, saying, it'd be good if you could speak to your counterpart, and
he did that?
Yes, he did that.
Do you think his stature has gone up in the eyes of the world as India's voice on the global stage as a result of this declaration?
I can put it both ways. I think the declaration also happened because his stature had gone up. Yeah. When he sort of brought up the issue with some of his counterparts, the fact that this was Prime Minister Modi himself bringing up the issue, I think definitely had an impact on his counterparts. And then, typically what happens is they then tell the people, saying, okay, look, make a harder effort, find some fix. So this was happening at multiple levels.
Minister, the Delhi Declaration has been criticized by a few for toning down the language of the Russia-Ukraine war, saying that, references to Russian aggression have been done away with, and in some senses this is a bit of a cop-out given what we're seeing in Ukraine at this moment. How do you explain or justify that?
No, I first of all, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's a cop-out. In fact, I think the people who are putting it that way are not understanding really what is happening in the world, and I'll explain to you why. Look, the first thing is, we had a formulation which was circa November 2022 at Bali. Now, haven't things changed after that? Has time stood still? Are we exactly in September 2023 where we were in November 22? Of course we are not. So now tell me, if we are to do a cut and paste of Bali, if your entire analysis is, so there is Bali, where is the, what is it you have changed, and that becomes a plus or a minus exercise. I think it's lazy. I think it's very mechanical. It also ignores what has happened since then. And most of all, and this is very fundamental to us, look at actually what are the new issues which have been flagged. So let me give you an understanding of what it is which we did this time. If you see the fundamental, I would say the core concept of our core agenda of our G20, it was really about the global south. Now the Ukraine conflict has directly impacted the global south. So that didn't come through in Bali. Now tell me, a year after that, given food shortages, given inflation, given energy shortages, given the impact it has had on economies across the developing world, don't you think in fairness we needed to reflect that? So the idea that we should, just do a cut and paste and stick with exactly what was Bali, I think would have been an enormous, not just disservice, I think it would have been a huge disappointment to 130 countries in the world. Now I'll give you a second example. What is a crucial issue today? The Black Sea grain corridor. Okay, the fact that, that worked and now it's not working. Should that not have been included? Okay. Let me give you a third example. There are today concerns that the infrastructure which delivers on food or fertilizer, that is being attacked. Should that not be included in this? So To my mind, actually, and in fact, I can even add a fourth one. You know, we've had, even in the last few weeks, meetings about finding a way out on Ukraine. There was a meeting in Copenhagen. There was a meeting in Saudi Arabia and Jeddah. There have been other discussions. So if countries since Bali, if they've been trying for a way out, should that not be recognized? So I would then ask a counter question. If the entire purpose of that exercise is to carry everything mechanically through, do a cut and paste from Bali to here, then that's like saying that, you know, I'm really not taking cognizance of dialogue. I attach no importance to food security, or the Black Sea grain corridor doesn't matter to me. Now, you know, that's not the view of the majority of countries. So we had to find a different set of words and different formulations, which is why I said, look, Bali was Bali. Delhi is Delhi.
I'm very curious, does the G20 now officially become the G21? Does the name change?
Well, I'm not quite sure how that works.
If you are not sure, then how is anybody supposed to be sure?
Meaning, you know, what happened was, in a sense, G20, yes, it's 20 countries, but G20 has also become a brand.
Okay.
You know, yeah, I would say we will discover whether now that the African Union has joined as a permanent member, exactly what people call it. This G20 did not address that question.
Why was the inclusion of the African Union into the G20 such a key priority for the Modi government? How is India's approach to countries in Africa likely to be different from what China has been doing? Because over the last 2 decades, they've been building deep linkages, which has left a lot of African countries in deep debt. So how is our approach likely to be different, Minister?
Well, two issues here. What is our approach to Africa? Second approach, why is it important Africa be included in the G20? Let me take the second one. You know, it's been talked about for some time. It's not a new issue. And even at Bali, the African Union chair, Senegal, tried very hard, but, you know, people didn't have the bandwidth at that time to look at it. Now, we felt very early on that we should put this on the agenda. Why did we feel that? Variety of reasons. One, you know, part of it is, you can say, the solidarity of the developing world, of the decolonized world, that our feeling for each other is very much stronger. The second, that if you look, here I'm talking particularly of the Modi government and Prime Minister Modi personally, he has a very strong belief, conviction in the philosophy of no one left behind. Okay, no one left behind, even in terms of our own country, our own society. So if you look at everything that we've done over the last 10 years, a large part of it is, you know, make sure in food, in financial inclusion, in housing, in health, that in Kisan, in Saman Nidhi. So the whole idea of an inclusive India where people get their fair share of support. Now, if that's your fundamental conviction cannot stop at your borders. It's then a worldview. So if you feel that, let us say, an aspirational district has been left behind in India, or a community has been left behind, or a demography has been left behind, it applies equally in international affairs. And from the very beginning, he's always had that view that, look, we need to go the extra mile where Africa is concerned.
And there seems to be good feedback in African countries.
Yes, absolutely. So what we did was, we did those initial soundings. Okay, so we asked people saying, look, folks, this been on the agenda, should we do something? And, you know, it's in the nature of these kind of platforms that nobody differs, but nobody quite belts the cat. So I think Prime Minister decided he would do it. So he then, some months ago, wrote to the other 19 leaders saying, in my view, this should be done. And please let me know if you agree with me. So I think I give him that credit, that in a way he forced the issue, that he put it on the table. And, you know, and the nature of the issue was such, you know, there was really nobody who would have opposed it. But it's just that nobody made an effort to do it. Maybe Mr. Modi's sort of sense of social justice is much stronger.
Are you hoping this triggers a move towards reforming the United Nations Security Council? Because we've got it done for somebody else, and now others should also get the message.
I don't think, no. That's a kind of a, I know you don't mean it that way, but it should not look, this wasn't done as a transaction. Okay, this was done because it was the right thing to do. Now, if by doing the right thing, you also encourage others to do a right thing, you know, there's no harm in that. I mean, after all, in a slightly different context, we also took the lead in the expansion of the BRICS. That when it came to the BRICS expansion, it was India which actually had the largest list of potential nominees which we backed, and we succeeded in sort of pretty much getting every one of them in. So that's one part of it. The second part of, you know, the other part of the question, you know, what is our policy towards Africa, I think came out in the G20, which is Africa today requires special care. It requires, you know, the rest of the world to do much more than it's doing. We have done we tried to do it in different ways. And we've always taken the view that, look, with Africa, the development partnership will be based on the priorities of Africa. So today, if you go to Africa, India stands out as the country which, you know, paved the way for African Union's entry into G20. India stands out as a country which actually stood by them during the COVID, which has actually done this global south. I mean, if global south is today an accepted word, and all of this has happened in the last 10 months, that in the last 10 months, this concept of global south, as I say, it's not just entered the lexicon of diplomacy, it's entered the conscience of nations, that people appreciate, they buy into it. And I think for me, it's one of the key outcomes of the New Delhi summit.
One of the other big outcomes, not directly in the G20 but on the sidelines, was the announcement about the India, Mid East, Europe economic corridor. Now, some are calling this like a boat and rail initiative to take on China's BRI, or in some